Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CAG Access Fall Institute. My name is Dr. Julia Nyberg, and I serve as Executive Director for the California Association for the Gifted.
Good morning, I'm Julie Hull. I'm the President of the California Association for the Gifted. If you'd like to ask any questions during this session, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the toolbar. Questions will be answered at the end of the session.
Please don't hesitate to join CAG by becoming a member today as an individual or school site. You can sign up by going to www.cagifted.org and clicking on membership.
This session will last from 9 o'clock to 9:50. The next session will start at 10 o'clock. You can either stay in the room or use the same link for the next session.
I have the distinct honor of introducing a friend and colleague, Dr. Joy Lawson Davis. Dr. Joy Lawson Davis is an award-winning scholar, highly sought-after speaker, professional development trainer, and instructor. Currently, she serves as core faculty at Bridges Graduate School for Cognitive Diversity and an instructor at Johns Hopkins University. She's a former member of the National Association for Gifted Children's Board of Directors and a member of many advisory boards, including the Roper School in Michigan. Welcome, Dr. Joy Lawson Davis.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for me and good morning for you. I'm glad to be here with you for your Fall Equity Institute, sponsored by CAG, and look forward to sharing some information with you and then hearing some of your ideas on how we can increase equity in gifted education services. Thank you so much, Julie, and your board for inviting me to be a part of this conference. I'm going to see now if I can share my screen quickly. Let's see what happens when I try to get to my, okay. All right, let's see what happens here. Okay. Oh, oops. Just a moment. Okay. Okay. Give it a few seconds to come up and then we'll get started. I have it's ready. Can you see it, Julia?
Yes.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So I have for you this morning, for your pondering about some of what I'm beginning to see across the country around Black giftedness. And I had some conversations recently with family and colleagues about this issue. And I thought today I would share some information with you all during the Institute to get your feedback and to help you to let you understand where I'm coming from when I say owning our own power. Black giftedness rising to the top. Black giftedness rising to the top. Today, we'll discuss the profiles of gifted individuals across a variety of domains who represent, in my view, the current status of how Black giftedness is manifesting itself and rising to the top to demonstrate the future of Black giftedness. Demonstrate the future of Black giftedness, not necessarily the field itself, but the future of giftedness within the Black community. So stick with me on this, all right? And if you have questions or concerns, I'll field them through your Q&A, and then at the end, we'll take time to respond and hear your concerns as we go through. Despite the beginnings of many, many students who are from the Black community, despite their beginnings, we recognize an increasing number of students who are connecting with their families, community organizations, and in some cases, some of our school districts to have them identify increased access to gifted services. And of course, when access is increased and opportunities are increased, and then we see a change in the way that we view giftedness, a change in the way we identify, a change in the way that we get Black students and other students of color in gifted programs, despite their beginnings of inequities, poverty. We're seeing a number of cases and individual cases. Now, when I say we, I'm particularly referring to the work that I do with school districts, with parents. I have a number of clients who contact me and talk with me about their gifted child. I mediate for some of these students and their families nationwide. When I do parent workshops, I come in contact with individuals who either have had great success in having their children identified or just abject failure and not having the children identified. But just the same, despite their beginnings, some people press on and are very persistent, despite this child's gender, despite the lack of teacher belief and underestimation of their talents, of their gifts, despite the neighborhoods they come from. And then despite other exceptionalities, as Julia mentioned, a number of some of my work now is around being 3E, thrice exceptional. I'm looking to increase the numbers of thrice exceptional students that are included in our twice exceptional literature, our research, and our training for teachers, not just across the country, but around the world. We also have to consider that many of our highly gifted students are in our classrooms, but sometimes they're invisible. But despite their invisibility, despite being a member of an oppressed group, despite some of the language differences and parent and family support, or what some educators believe the lack of parent and family support, despite all of that, we are beginning to see in pockets of the nation and communities, and especially with organizations who've taken on this challenge of identifying Black students in ways that sometimes our schools are not able to do or not willing to do. Across all domains, we're seeing Black learners demonstrate their giftedness and manifesting it in the STEM areas, in humanities, in leadership, in athletics, and in the arts. What we're finding is that, once again, I want you to consider that sometimes when school districts fail, when they fail these young people, there are people in the community and organizations who are taking up the mantle and taking up the responsibility and having these students identified and having them be a part of specialized programs. And there are a number of those programs across the country. So when I suggest that we are owning our own power, I am believing, because what I'm seeing outside of schools, I'm seeing organizations, parents, family groups take up the mantle of identifying our students when the school districts fail to do so. Because of stereotyping, poor decision-making, the subtle kinds of beliefs that teachers express towards our children, prejudice, diversity, all kinds of reasons we have, just simply for, in some cases, just because of the color of a child's skin, some of our teachers are unwilling to even refer a Black student for gifted programs. We don't look beyond the color of their skin, what our past experience has been. We just don't look beyond that to see the giftedness in the child. Despite microaggressions, there are a number of very subtle and nonverbal and verbal behaviors that are committed consciously or not, that is oftentimes directed at a member of a marginalized group. And in this case, I'm referring to Black students, that has a harmful and derogatory effect. But what we have to be about is normalizing teacher behavior. I had the opportunity about 2 years ago to sit in on an evaluation session with 3 young ladies who were participating in their communities, one of their governor schools. Here in Virginia, we have governor schools that serve the needs of gifted students. Some of them are part-time governance schools where students can go half day to the governance school. A particular governance school could be a science and technology and math, engineering and math governance school. In some cases, some areas we have arts governance schools. In some areas we have international studies. We have a large number of governance schools across the state. But oftentimes, even when Black students are identified for those governance schools, they don't always feel fairly treated. So during this meeting, after the meeting was over, these 3 students had made their own decision to withdraw from the governance school because they didn't feel as if they were being fairly treated in the governance school. And when we asked them if they had anything else to say, to share with the committee, to help us perhaps do a better job with students like themselves, one student spoke up loud and clear and said, by now, it should be normalized that teachers know how to work with gifted Black females. And this student was a student in a rural area school, and at the time she was in the 10th grade. At the time she was only in the 10th grade. So normalizing teacher behavior is one of the ways that we can help our Black students, our brown students, our low-income students become, have them feel comfortable in being in a gifted program. It's one thing to identify these students, but it's another thing to sustain them in our programs or retain them in our programs. And we can't do that unless we are normalizing teacher behavior. So teachers are more culturally sensitive, more culturally competent, understanding who these students are. So who are some of the, what I call Black gifted students rising? The Black gifted who are rising. Some of these folks are people that you may know of because of the media, popular media, if not just on social media, so that you understand who their names are. You've seen them, the names of some of them more recently because of some of the worldwide sports activities that have been going on. But some names you may recognize because of other events or other kinds of activities you've seen on social media. So we have Amanda Gorman. I call her a Black gifted rising student, a young person who is a National Poet Laureate in her particular area. She's now an author of more than one book. We do, of course, everyone should by now know about Simone Biles. We'll talk about Simone in just a bit longer. The world gymnast champion. She is definitely a Black gifted rising person, in my view, in her particular area. We also have a young man who was recently named as a professor at Cambridge University, the youngest professor at Cambridge University. His name is Dr. Jason Arday. And what many people don't know about Dr. Arday is that he is also a thrice exceptional person. He did not learn how to read and communicate until he was beyond the normal age. And he went on to learn more deeply. And if you go online now and just write Jason Arday, you'll see a number of videos that where Jason tells his own story about what it meant for him to be a student who had other exceptionalities, but who was also very gifted. And so we know that Jason, in my view, is another one of what I call Black gifted rising. What we don't know enough about are students who have multiple exceptionalities, including being gifted and being Black. We don't know enough about these young people. We're not treating them in our research studies. We're not sharing training for teachers around what it's like to work with students who are Black, gifted, and perhaps have a learning disability. We're not doing enough work in that particular area. And so myself and a few of my colleagues are working harder to get these students included in some of our research around twice exceptionalities. I've worked with, for a number of years, a young man whose name is Caleb Anderson. Caleb is from Georgia. And he, a few years back, I think he hit the media because he was the youngest student accepted to Georgia Tech. He was considered a prodigy in science and technology. He's doing quite well. He's entering into his third year at Georgia Tech and doing, as I said, doing very, very well. He is definitely a Black gifted student on the rise. We also came in contact with John Sumter. John is one of our Jenkins scholars that we named a few years ago. And John is now a Yale freshman. He was also a part of the television show called Child Genius many years ago when he was just a kid. That was the first time that I saw John when I watched one of the episodes of that television show, Child Genius, when I watched the episodes there. And then we have other track and field stars. And one young lady who caught my attention a few years back, his name's Shikari Richardson, from a very difficult family background. And Shikari ran into some issues and problems. But this year, when she came back, she rose to the top in her track and field area. So there are lots of people like these young people here. They're, in my view, once again, they're not just one of the hundreds or one of the thousands. I am convinced that there are so many more Amanda Gormans in our classrooms. There were so many more Simone Biles in our gymnastics or athletics gyms. I know that there are more people like Jason Arday who haven't been recognized. People focus perhaps more on the deficits that twice exceptional or thrice exceptional people have rather than on their strengths. And I know that there are other students like Caleb Anderson, because as I mentioned earlier, I've spoken to advised parents of these prodigies for a number of years, served as an advocate for them during their identification and service development meetings at their schools. I came in contact with John as a Jenkins scholar. And then Shikari Richardson, again, I believe is one of the many who have great strengths, great gifts, but are not being recognized because of all kinds of discriminatory factors that come about in their lives. And also perhaps because they haven't had access and they haven't had the opportunities that our gifted students need to have in order to rise to the top. This is Jason and upon his graduation from Cambridge. And again, you can actually just go, you can go to Google his name and go to YouTube and search for Jason Arday, and you will find some very interesting information about this young man. And I ask you to do that so that you can have a better idea of what the potential of Black gifted students are, what the potential of these students happens to be. Haley Taylor Schlitz is a young lady that I came in contact with a few years ago. I wrote her profile in the second edition of Bright, Talented, and Black. She and I together, crafted her profile. Haley was a student in regular public schools, but her parents didn't feel as if the school system was treating her well and not providing what she needed as a gifted learner. They pulled her out of school and her sister and brother out, and they began homeschooling them. Haley, as a result, became the youngest law school student to graduate, female law school student to graduate in this nation's history. But instead of going into law, Haley became involved with some teacher educators and very interested in becoming a classroom teacher. And so that's what she did. She is now a classroom teacher, enjoying the experience, and is also continues to be an advocate for females and other underserved populations. Once again, Haley Taylor Schlitz. And Belen, my goodness, this young lady is a Virginia native, and she is, as far as I know, the only crayon activist in the nation, the only crayon activist. And you say, well, what is a crayon activist? Well, Belen, you can read Belen's story as well, but what Belen discovered in her classroom was when she asked for a skin color crayon in her class one day, a student gave her the peach color crayon and it didn't match her skin, and it bothered her. It bothered her a great deal. And it didn't match the skin colors. When she looked at all of the colors in the crayon, the first crayon box she looked in, didn't have any skin colors there that represented her family members. And as a result, she spoke with her mom, and she told her mom she wanted to create a box of crayons that had crayon colors that represent skin tones of all people. And as a result, that's what she did. So if you, again, look up Belen Wood, you'll see that Belen has on the market an art kit, and along with her art kit, she has crayons. She's traveled internationally. She's been recognized by many youth magazines, and has taken her story around activism and equity around the world. And her quote is, "Changing the world one crayon at a time." Some people think, well, this is not that important, but it is. It was very important to her. And if you look at the new crayon boxes, even that Crayola has put out in the last few years, they have changed their colors. And the reason they changed the colors of their crayons, they did so because of the work that Belen was doing. And of course, we all know Amanda Gorman, who was a poet laureate. She's now an author and actually a public figure because of her activism. And she's also become a model. So she represents, in my view, the multiple gifts that many of our gifted children have, many of our gifted students have. But once again, without access and without opportunities, their gifts will never be discovered. Without access and without opportunities. Actually, I see he's not gonna like I'm doing this, but I see Dr. Gil Whiting as one of our members in our group here today. And Dr. Whiting has a daughter who is also recognized for her giftedness as a poet very early in her, and she actually published some of her poetry. I'm gonna ask Dr. I'm gonna put you on the spot, Gil. If you're still in your room at your computer, I'm putting you on the spot. When I'm done, I'm gonna ask you to talk to the group about your daughter and see, because I believe that the work that she has done represents the work that many other children, many other students can do as well, if they have access and if they have opportunities. So I hope you're with me there, Gail. World-class athletes, of course, we know all about Simone Biles. We've talked about Simone. And this young lady here and her family, I believe when this picture was posted, it just created ripples all across the United States and all around the world. And why did it create ripples? First of all, because of Coco Gauff's, because of her championship, but also because of the fact that this picture of Coco with her mother and her father dispels so many of the myths about Black families, so many of the myths, the stereotypes about Black families. And it's a picture that I think we should share and understand and embrace more often, and begin working with families in a culturally responsive way, begin working with them and not allowing stereotypes of discrimination and racism to typify what we believe about Black families. If we happen not to be Black, then we don't really know about Black families. And so I have some recommendations for us for culturally responsive training that should happen, that might help our teachers and our educators know more about the community, the Black community. This young man, I came across him not too long ago. John Urschel was a football player with, I think it was Baltimore Ravens. And now he's a math professor at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So once again, destroying the stereotypes about who our young people are, destroying the stereotypes about who they are, about who our athletes are, who our young people are that are into the arts, into other areas of humanity, destroying the myth. Now, there would be many people who would see a football player or see the guys who play football every Sunday or every Thursday night on their screens and never think about them as having these kinds of gifts, these kinds of talents. And so what does that mean for us when we're in schools and in high schools, middle schools, working with these young people? It means that we will look at them differently and find out what their other strengths are, what their other interests are. So someone found out what Ursul's strengths were so that he could have the training he needed. So when he finished playing football, he could actually go in and get the job that he wanted, to be a professor, a math professor at MIT, to be a math professor at MIT. There are also a couple of unique ventures that are going on that I want to make you all aware of. Some of you may already be aware of Yvette Robinson, who is a social worker, who actually now has developed a program model for identifying gifted and high ability children in foster care. Another population that has not been recognized, a group of learners who are out there who many times come across some very challenging circumstances in their lives. But Yvette, I spoke to her at length one day a few weeks ago, but Yvette was very concerned about the foster care children that she was coming across, who she saw to be very high ability and be gifted learners, but were not receiving the services, didn't have access, of course, didn't have the opportunities that other students have. So look out for Yvette Robinson and the Xavier House and her work. Also want to draw your attention to Caitlin Smith. Caitlin is a Harvard University doctoral student who's also an environmentalist. She is the founder of an organization called Our Wild Minds. And I put the website right at the end of the sentence there. If you are interested in more about what Caitlin is doing, she's primarily focusing on Black adult giftedness, doing research. She's actually taught a course this past spring and summer. She taught a course and has another cohort that she's recruiting for the second phase of her course around being an adult Black gifted person and the challenges that we face across all domains, across all types of areas. As an environmentalist, even she found herself to be one of the few who was interested in that area, or who could have access, and it concerned her because she thought, being an environmentalist, that doesn't have anything, that shouldn't have a color attached to it. But I also had a chance to meet with Caitlin and bring her into my course over this past summer as a guest lecturer. And she's a very, very interesting young person. And I know that you're going to hear a lot more from Caitlin Smith in the near future. But with all of these things that are going on, stereotyping, racism, discrimination continues to negatively affect our students, Stereotyping, what is it? We know that there are some biases that are very conscious and others that are unconscious about certain groups of people, that individuals from outside of their own conscious awareness, everyone holds some unconscious beliefs about various groups and identities, about various groups and social identities. And these biases stem from one's tendency to organize people's social world by categories and leave them in those categories. A stereotype exists when a relatively isolated characteristic is assumed to be representative of the whole group. Our students cannot have access, they can't have opportunities if we look at them through the lens of being stereotyped all the time. They cannot have access. We know that in many cases, we are still using teacher referral as one of the primary sources for admitting gifted students, getting students evaluated. We know that is the worst kind of strategy we can use, because we know that Black students are not going to be referred by their teachers for gifted programs at the same rate that white students will be. We know the research around that. We also know there's some other strategies that can be utilized, and school districts are hesitant because of funding, or hesitant simply because of their discriminatory views towards Black students. these are some of the stereotypes. I was going to take these out, and I thought, no, I'm going to leave them in here because we need to maybe remind some people of what some of the implicit biases and stereotypes that we still view Black students by. Black girls oftentimes are treated like older than their age. Perhaps in some cases, perhaps because of physicality, but just sometimes they're treated differently. They're treated like they're older because of the way perhaps they may speak. Others don't understand the language. Others don't understand, their social behaviors. We also have stereotypes around athleticism versus intellectualism of certain ethnic groups. But I just showed you an example of Ursula, who was a football player, who is now MIT professor. So we can't display and can't hold on to these stereotypes about Black students being more athletic than they are intellectual. We can't hold on to that because that is not the case. That is not the case. But some of us will hold on to that until either we are no longer in the game of evaluating and referring students, or we're convinced to believe otherwise. That Black students oftentimes have a lack of interest in achievement in STEM. But that lack of interest is not what keeps students out of STEM. What keeps them out of STEM are access to STEM opportunities. It's access and opportunities. Then, of course, there's so many people who still believe that Black students and brown students are more violent than white students. That's foolishness. That doesn't make any sense either. No matter what you've experienced, it is not the case. That is not the case. Violence and trauma can be experienced by people from all races, all income groups, not just students who has more melanin in their skin. And then, of course, as I said earlier, some believe that there's a parental lack of concern for Black families in particular. Black families don't care about their children. They don't care about their children, so they're not as involved or as engaged. That's an entire day of workshop experiences to talk about the engagement of Black families in education. But there's a high level of disrespect for authority, and then, of course, all kinds of other stereotypes that we hold against Black students as a group, not looking again at their strengths, not looking at the ability levels they have across domains, and looking more at deficiencies, things that you see every now and then, or you've had a bad experience, and then all Black students after that are held accountable for teachers and educators' bad experiences. So how do we nurture these kids? I don't want to go too far because I want to give us a chance to have some conversation. But I also want, Dr. Gilman, are you there? Dr. Whiting?
Yes, sir.
You there?
I am. I'll be ready for you. Just let me know when.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So how do we nurture these students? How do we nurture Black gifted students? There are a number of strategies, there are a number of program models that have been utilized and have been very, very successful. One way is to identify cohorts, that's groups of students, begin early and continuously nurture that group of students. When you identify one or two, place them in a larger group of students who are not like themselves and don't have their same experiences, it's going to be a higher likelihood that they're not going to be able to stay in that program, or may not even want to stay, because there's nothing there that makes them feel a sense of belonging. These students need to feel as if they belong in our gifted programs, and that gifted programs are designed for them as well as for others. Using culturally responsive strategies, nurturing their visual spatial gifts. We have some new research that tells us that visually spatially gifted students are underrepresented in gifted programs, and that these students typically are Black students and sometimes Latino or brown students whose gifts are not being recognized in our schools. Integrate the arts into academic content, provide mentors of similar backgrounds and interests for our students so that they have a model for someone who looks like them, who has an interest like they have, that can help them as they go through their educational journey. Providing after school and summer enrichment programs to kind of fill in the gaps for where they may not have had access and opportunities when they were younger. And professional, comprehensive, culturally responsive training is important for all staff, not just teachers, but administrators, counselors, support staff, instructional coaches, librarians. It's important for all staff to have culturally responsive training, for them to all be culturally competent. Using cross-cultural training as a part of that, where teachers and support staff have an opportunity to be in the community that they serve. That if these teachers or support staff are predominantly white and they've not been into the Black community and have experienced, other kinds of perhaps, gone into the Black community, into their churches or their faith houses, their houses of faith, or gone to conferences there, or going, to even to concerts in the Black community, or into the barbershop, places where people congregate, as we say, and so that you can get a better sense for who the community is. Cross-cultural training is important for our educators. So here are a few keys to improving equity in the classroom. Give students tools, and that's a part of the cultural competency work that you'll find out about if you've not been engaged in cultural competency training, that they need to be comfortable in any environment. Employ self-advocacy strategies. Teach students how to advocate for themselves and speak up for themselves. Self-empowerment, so that they can help educators understand what they need in terms of their understandings of different content areas, what they need in terms of the ways that they're being taught, what kinds of experiences outside of school perhaps do they need that would help them. But self-advocacy, empowerment is important for all of our students to have. Set classroom standards that don't disallow inequitable terminologies. That in my classroom, we don't use these words. In my classroom, we don't speak in this way. We don't use microaggressions. In my classroom, we don't focus on implicit biases. And if something like that comes up, then that's a teachable moment for us to have conversation with our students, that all students in our classrooms are going to be safe. So creating a safe zone is important for all of our students. Use the challenges to equitable language to initiate conversation. When we challenge a student or a person because of the way that they speak, use that as a time to talk about, how does it feel when I'm being, criticized, or when I'm being, put down because of the language that I use, or because of the way that I speak, or because of the other things that I may do. How does it feel when I'm talked about because of the way that I dress, or because of the way that I move, but my demeanor? Have an opportunity, give students an opportunity to speak about that in the classroom, so until everyone is comfortable. Create affinity groups to meet regularly to discuss equity issues. I'm understanding from some colleagues that affinity groups are under, they're being criticized, along with some other issues around diversity and equity in different pockets of the country. I still say that when students have a chance to talk about their feelings and how they're impacted by the way that others treat them, by what they're learning in school, how they're impacted, is important for us in order for us to move beyond the places where we are now with discrimination and with such a closed mind about what students should and should not learn. So I want to ask Dr. Whiting. I called him Dr. Gill a moment ago. I want to ask Dr. Whiting. We were speaking about owning our own power, Gill, and speaking about the ways that we're seeing Black students rise up. I want you to tell the group, we have a few minutes, you could tell the group, if you would, hope you don't mind, Julia, that if you could tell the group about your daughter.
Okay, well, how's everybody doing? I don't know if I'm being seen enough. That doesn't matter. Um, my daughter. Wow. Any parent who is asked to talk about their child, I mean, unless you were my mother talking about me, who talks about their child is going to give you this flowing, glowing kind of deal. I listened to the story you talked about the crayon, and I found it amazing because Havlin did the same exact thing at the Waldorf School in Nashville, and she did it with the Advent calendar, and they were coloring parts, and she was at a Waldorf school, so they were doing this thing, and they had three crayons, and they had nothing that matched her skin, as you can see, she light skin and all that, but it was still. She said, "Can we?" And her words was, "Can we get some diversity in the village?" So I find it kind of interesting that, this is a phenomena that psychologically and socially kids are dealing with day to day. And we all know that we all tend to drop out of something psychologically before we drop out of it physically. So if they don't feel welcome, if they don't feel like they belong and those type of things there. But Havlin, of course, had me and her mom close to her. She had you and a lot of other folks as extended aunties and uncles to give her that support that she needed. I don't know if you can see my screen again, but I have a picture of her. She also was a model, uh, covered on several magazine covers. She was a cellist, first year cellist all her time as a freshman all the way through high school. She wrote two books. Now, one is on here, and What Would You Say If You Could, which is dynamite. And I think anybody on here should look for this book. I don't get any residuals from it at all, but I think when you talk about listening to, she has amazed me with the words she has to say. You can also find her on social media, but also on YouTube and listen to some of her videos. Matter of fact, Dr. Nyberg and her colleague, Dr. Jess Mangione, used some of her videos in some of their presentations. So it's powerful, and it's what our kids are doing. But she also dealt with people saying that, she was really tall, really soon. She was the tallest kid in her class, but she was the youngest kid in her class. So she was ostracized for that. Her hair was too curly, so she tried to straighten it. All of those things that kids have to go through. A lot of kids have to go through. I understand it, but the added pressure of her being in that place. The good story behind it and the ending to this will be that she's going on now. She speaks 4 languages. She's working on her 5th. She's actually in a junior year at Tulane University. She studied this year in Europe, and she's going there for graduate school as well. So she's just doing phenomenal things. And I think all of our children, I don't care who they are capable of these things if we actually treat them like they're our own.
Thank you, Gil. Thank you so much. Yes, I've been working with Gil for a number of years now, and we were very impressed with her book, with his daughter's book. What would you say if you could? So, what would you say if you could? Again, it's so important for us to stop stereotyping and categorizing students in negative ways. It's so important for us to stop doing that. And if we are truly going to be advocates, and again, this presentation was focused on Black students in particular, but I say this about all students who are being underrepresented in our programs. If we are going to be advocates for these students, then we have to be the ones who speak up and say the stereotypes don't work here. We don't use stereotypes in our district. We don't use implicit biases. We're going to do all we can to grow our programs so that they are considered accessible and programs of opportunity. Accessible and programs of opportunity. That's what we want for these children. And when we do that, we will see the giftedness in all of them rise up. We will, and that's what I meant by this whole presentation. To see the giftedness rise up, we have to give students opportunity and access, and we have to get rid of the stereotyping, the implicit biases, the microaggressions, all those things that destroy our children's lives. We're in this business. We're in this business to save lives. And so I do hope that something I said here gave you some encouragement in one particular area, or maybe struck a chord, something resonated that may change, or that perhaps you can pass some of this information on to others. So Julie, do we have some questions here or?
Yes, we do. We have a question from one of our colleagues, and they say this work is so essential. So many organizations, however, feel they are culturally responsive, but are crushing children and colleagues on a daily basis with innate practices. Is there a recommendation of trainings and/or trainers for working on making meaningful change in our organization? And I know Dr. Whiting did put a link into the National Black Student Achievement Association, but I would also like to, on behalf of our speakers here today, say that all of them are available for consulting. So you are more than welcome to contact them for consulting. But I'm also going to turn the mic over to you, Dr. Joy Lawson Davis, and see if you could speak to any recommendations that you have for trainings or trainers to make meaningful change in organizations to make sure that practices are genuinely culturally responsive.
Yes, of course. I do appreciate the comment about reaching out to the speakers. Myself, Donna Ford, Dr. Whiting, Aaron Floyd Fears Floyd. There's a number of us. Shelley Trotman. We are a cluster of individuals who sometimes work together, sometimes we work solo, but we're all after the same thing. We're all after access and opportunities. And so I do believe that if you had a question, if you were looking for individuals, I thought I put my there's my email addresses. So I didn't add a page full of research and all that, but I did add my email addresses. So please reach out. One person can't do all this work. It's a lot of great work to be done, but one person can't do it. Some of us have written articles, some have written books about this, but we are deeply, deeply concerned about equity in gifted education. And we've been at this, many of us have been at this for a long time, and we'll continue to do this work because, again, we're trying to save lives here. We're trying to save our school districts' reputations, but we're definitely trying to save lives in the work that we do. And I would encourage you, reach out to me and ask questions, ask about a research article, ask if I know of school districts that have models in place. I will answer and try to give you as much information as possible. Ask for experts. Again, I would recommend that you do book studies in situations where you really want to dig deep into a particular issue. I'm working with Matt Fugate and Wendy Behrens and Boswell now on book study with Texas. I've done a book study with North Carolina. So we've done book studies all over the country. And that's the time when you can actually read text and content by experts, and then you have the opportunity to get some of your questions answered and set up models for yourselves. But yes, we're available for consultation and anything. If you want to reach out, just ask about something or a particular area. Gil's work in the scholar identity is not surpassed. There's nobody in the country, I guess, around the world who's done more work in that area around students developing scholar identity, particularly Black students, Black and Brown students. And so, just reach out and we'll do what we can to pass you, to send you to someone who can do good work. But I do recommend, again, we can't move away from cultural competency. Cultural competency is critical for all school personnel and in gifted education because of the dilemma that we have of underrepresentation, the tragic dilemma. Then, absolutely cultural competency training is critical for your school districts.
Thank you so much for attending this session by Dr. Joy Lawson Davis. The next session will begin at 10 o'clock in this same room. Looking forward to seeing you soon.